Ethan Caldwell was not your typical millionaire. Unlike many others who flaunted their wealth with flashy cars, yachts, and extravagant parties, Ethan preferred a quieter, more calculated approach to life. He had built his empire from the ground up, starting as a young man with nothing but ambition and a fierce determination to succeed. Now at 35, he was one of the most successful businessmen in the city, known for his sharp mind, strategic thinking, and unrelenting work ethic. But despite his professional achievements, there was one area of his life where Ethan felt completely out of his depth: relationships. For years, Ethan had avoided serious commitments, believing that love and marriage were distractions from his goals. To him, emotions were messy, unpredictable, and time-consuming. His parents, however, had different ideas. They came from a traditional background and believed strongly in the importance of family ties. For months, they had been urging Ethan to settle down and carry on the family name. At first, Ethan brushed off their suggestions, focusing instead on expanding his business ventures. But eventually, even he couldn't ignore the growing pressure. The turning point came during a family dinner one evening. Ethan's father, a stern man with old-fashioned values, brought up the topic yet again. "Ethan," he said, his voice firm but tinged with frustration, "you're not getting any younger. It's time you think about your future, not just your career, but your legacy." Ethan sighed, knowing this conversation was inevitable. His mother chimed in, her tone softer but equally insistent. "We've found someone for you," she announced, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "Her family is well respected, and she's exactly the kind of woman who can support you." Ethan raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Support me? What does that even mean?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. His father explained that the Bennetts, a family they'd done business with for years, had a daughter named Clara who was intelligent, hardworking, and modest. According to them, she would make an ideal match. Ethan listened half-heartedly, his mind already drifting back to the pile of documents waiting for him at the office. Over the next few days, Ethan's parents continued to push the idea. They described Clara as quiet, reserved, and not particularly striking, emphasizing that she wasn't the type to demand attention or interfere with his busy schedule. In fact, they seemed almost apologetic about her appearance, assuring Ethan that her personality and loyalty would more than compensate for her lack of beauty. This description suited Ethan perfectly. He didn't want a glamorous wife who would hog the spotlight or disrupt his carefully structured life. A quiet, obedient partner sounded like the perfect solution. Clara Bennett, on the other hand, lived a world away from Ethan's high-powered lifestyle. She grew up in a small town surrounded by nature, spending much of her childhood drawing, painting, and exploring the outdoors. Her parents, though wealthy, valued simplicity and encouraged Clara to pursue her passions rather than obsess over material things. From a young age, she showed a remarkable talent for art, creating vivid landscapes and portraits that captured the essence of her surroundings. Despite her creativity, Clara was naturally introverted, preferring the company of books and canvases to large crowds. When her parents approached her about the possibility of an arranged marriage to Ethan Caldwell, Clara was hesitant. She knew little about him beyond vague rumors of his success and icy demeanor. The thought of marrying someone she'd never met filled her with anxiety. Still, her parents assured her that it was a practical decision, one that would provide financial security and strengthen the bond between their families. After weeks of deliberation, Clara reluctantly agreed, hoping that perhaps they could find common ground over time. As the wedding date drew near, Ethan remained largely disengaged. He saw the arrangement purely as a business transaction, a way to appease his parents while securing valuable connections. He didn't bother meeting Clara beforehand, trusting the descriptions provided by his family. In his mind, she was a plain, unassuming woman who would blend seamlessly into the background of his life. He convinced himself that this lack of chemistry was a good thing. After all, he didn't have time for romance or drama. What he needed was stability, and if Clara fit the bill, then so be it. Meanwhile, Clara prepared for her new life with equal parts dread and curiosity. She spent hours imagining what Ethan might be like, cold and distant based on what she'd heard, but also wondered if there was more to him beneath the surface. On the eve of the wedding, as she stood in front of the mirror in her bridal gown, Clara took a deep breath. She reminded herself that marriages often evolved over time, and maybe, just maybe, this union wouldn't turn out to be as bleak as it seemed. Little did either of them know, fate had something entirely unexpected in store. The stage was set, the vows were written, and the clock was ticking toward a day that would change both their lives forever. Neither Ethan nor Clara could have predicted the surprises awaiting them, or how profoundly those moments would reshape their futures. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, with sunlight streaming through the windows of Ethan's luxurious penthouse. Despite his usual calm demeanor, Ethan felt a strange mix of anticipation and unease as he prepared for the ceremony. He had always prided himself on being in control of every situation, but today felt different. For the first time in years, he found himself unsure of what to expect. His parents had assured him that Clara was exactly the kind of woman who would complement his life, quiet, unassuming, and easy to manage. Still, a small part of him wondered if this decision would complicate things more than he anticipated. As Ethan stood at the altar later that afternoon, dressed in a tailored suit that exuded confidence and authority, he scanned the room absent-mindedly. The venue was elegant, filled with soft floral arrangements and warm lighting that created an intimate atmosphere. Guests whispered among themselves, speculating about the mysterious bride-to-be whom few had ever seen. Ethan barely paid attention to them. His thoughts were elsewhere, drifting between memories of his childhood and visions of the future he imagined building, or rather maintaining, with Clara. Then, the moment arrived. The doors at the back of the hall swung open, and all eyes turned toward the entrance. A hush fell over the crowd as Clara began her walk down the aisle, accompanied by her father. Ethan froze, his breath catching in his throat. What he saw defied every expectation he'd had. Clara looked nothing like the plain woman he'd been led to believe she was. Dressed in a flowing ivory gown adorned with delicate lace embroidery, she radiated grace and elegance. Her long, chestnut hair cascaded loosely around her shoulders, framing a face that seemed almost otherworldly in its beauty. Her features were soft yet striking, with high cheekbones, full lips, and eyes that sparkled with quiet intelligence. She carried herself with poise, each step measured and confident, as though she belonged in the spotlight despite her reserved nature. Ethan couldn't look away. His mind raced with questions. How could anyone describe this woman as ordinary? Why hadn't his family mentioned how breathtaking she truly was? For a brief moment, he felt foolish for assuming so much based on second-hand information. But beneath the shock, a flicker of admiration stirred within him. This wasn't just a transactional partnership anymore. It felt like something far more significant. Clara, for her part, noticed Ethan's reaction immediately. As she approached the altar, she stole glances at him through her veil, studying the man she was about to marry. She had heard plenty about Ethan Caldwell, the self-made millionaire with a reputation for being cold and calculating, but seeing him in person was different. Tall and broad-shouldered, he commanded attention without even trying. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his piercing blue eyes held a depth that intrigued her. Though his expression remained composed, she caught the subtle shift in his demeanor when their eyes met, a mixture of surprise and curiosity. When they finally stood face to face, the officiant began the ceremony, but neither of them was fully present in the moment. Ethan's mind kept replaying the image of Clara walking toward him, while Clara tried to decipher the emotions flickering across Ethan's face. Was his shock due to admiration or disappointment? She couldn't tell, and the uncertainty left, her feeling both nervous and hopeful. The vows passed in a blur, their words spoken softly but sincerely. When it came time to exchange rings, Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second before slipping the band onto Clara's finger. His hands were steady, but his touch lingered slightly longer than necessary, as if he were grounding himself in the reality of the situation. Clara mirrored his actions, her fingers brushing against his as she placed the ring on his hand. The contact sent a shiver down her spine, though she masked it with a polite smile. After the ceremony concluded, the The newlyweds posed for photographs with their families and guests. Ethan remained professional, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, but his gaze frequently drifted back to Clara. He couldn't stop thinking about how wrong everyone had been about her, or perhaps how deliberately misleading their descriptions had been. Was this some kind of test? Or had his own biases clouded his judgment? During the reception, Ethan found himself seated next to Clara at the head table. They exchanged polite conversation, discussing neutral topics like the weather and the decor. Despite the light tone of their dialogue, there was an undercurrent of tension between them, not hostile, but charged with unspoken curiosity. Ethan wanted to ask her directly, "Why didn't anyone tell me the truth about you?" But pride held him back. Instead, he settled for observing her from the corner of his eye, noting the way she interacted with others. She was warm and gracious, yet there was a quiet strength in her presence that intrigued him. At one point, Clara excused herself to take a short break from the festivities. Stepping outside onto a balcony overlooking the garden, she breathed in the cool evening air, letting the chaos of the day wash over her. She had expected the wedding to be overwhelming, but not in this way. Ethan's reaction earlier had thrown her off balance, leaving her unsure of where they stood. Did he see her as a partner, or merely a pleasant surprise? Unbeknownst to her, Ethan followed her outside moments later. He paused at the threshold, watching as she leaned against the railing, gazing up at the stars. There was something mesmerizing about the way the moonlight illuminated her profile, casting a gentle glow over her skin. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to consider the possibility that this marriage might be more than just a business arrangement. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. "Beautiful night," he said, breaking the silence. Clara turned to face him, startled but composed. "Yes, it is," she replied, her voice soft but steady. They stood there for a moment, neither knowing quite what to say next. Then Ethan spoke again, his tone more tentative than usual. "You're not what I expected." Clara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh? And what did you expect?" she asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. Ethan hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "Let's just say, I'm glad I was wrong." Her lips curved into a small smile, and for the first time that day the wall between them began to crack. It was a fleeting connection, fragile and uncertain, but it planted the seeds of something neither of them could have predicted. As they returned to the party together, side by side, the air around them seemed lighter, as if the weight of their preconceived notions had started to lift. Little did they know, this was only the beginning. Their journey was far from over, and the road ahead would challenge them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But for now, standing together under the starlit sky, they shared a quiet understanding. Sometimes, life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. The days following the wedding passed in a blur of adjustments and awkward silences. Ethan and Clara moved into his sprawling penthouse, a sleek apartment perched high above the city skyline. It was a space that reflected Ethan's personality, modern, minimalist, and meticulously organized. Every piece of furniture seemed to serve a purpose, every corner devoid of unnecessary clutter. To Clara, it felt cold and impersonal, like stepping into a museum rather than a home. She longed for warmth, for touches of color and life that would make the space feel lived in. But she didn't say anything, unsure if her preferences would be welcomed. For Ethan, living with Clara was an entirely new experience. He had always valued his independence, cherishing the quiet solitude of his evenings spent reviewing business reports or sketching ideas late into the night. Now there was another presence in his carefully curated world, a woman whose habits and routines were still a mystery to him. At first, he found himself hyper-aware of her movements, the soft rustle of pages as she flipped through a book, the rhythmic strokes of her paintbrush as she worked on a canvas in the corner of the living room, the faint hum of music she played while cooking dinner. These small sounds disrupted his usual calm, but over time they began to weave themselves into the fabric of his daily life. Despite sharing a roof, Ethan and Clara maintained a polite distance. Their interactions were cordial but restrained, lacking the spontaneity or intimacy that typically characterized married couples. They ate meals together occasionally, exchanging pleasantries about their respective days but rarely ventured beyond surface-level topics. Ethan avoided discussing emotions, fearing vulnerability might expose weaknesses he wasn't ready to confront. Clara, sensing his discomfort, chose not to push him, instead retreating into her art whenever loneliness crept in. One afternoon, while exploring the penthouse, Clara stumbled upon a room she hadn't noticed before. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a dimly lit study filled with stacks of papers, books, and scattered blueprints. Curious, she stepped inside, her eyes scanning the shelves until something caught her attention. Tucked away in a corner was a collection of old sketchbooks, their covers worn from years of use. Intrigued, Clara picked one up and flipped through its pages, discovering rough drawings of buildings, landscapes, and abstract designs. Each sketch bore Ethan's initials in the corner, along with dates stretching back to his college years. Clara smiled, realizing that beneath Ethan's polished exterior lay a creative soul. She had always suspected there was more to him than met the eye, and these sketches confirmed her intuition. Inspired by what she'd found, she decided to leave a small gift of her own, a gesture meant to bridge the gap between them. That evening, after Ethan returned from work, Clara placed one of her paintings on his desk. It was a vibrant depiction of two figures walking toward each other across a vast desert, their forms silhouetted against a fiery sunset. The scene symbolized both isolation and connection, themes Clara hoped would resonate with Ethan. When Ethan entered his study the next morning, he immediately noticed the painting. At first he frowned, wondering how it had gotten there. Then he saw the note attached to the frame. "I thought you might appreciate this. Clara." He studied the artwork closely, captivated by its depth and emotion. There was a raw honesty in the brushstrokes, a sense of longing and hope that mirrored his own internal struggles. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, the painting stirred something deep within him. That evening, during dinner, Ethan finally broke the silence. "Did you paint this?" he asked, gesturing toward the canvas now propped up on the dining table. Clara nodded, a shy smile playing on her lips. "Yes, I did. Do you like it?" "I do," Ethan admitted, surprising even himself with the sincerity in his voice. "It's powerful. Where did you learn to paint like that?" Clara shrugged, modestly. "I've been painting since I was a child. It's always been my way of expressing myself when words fail me." Ethan paused, considering her response. "You're incredibly talented," he said after a moment. "I never knew you were an artist." "There's a lot we don't know about each other," Clara replied gently. "Maybe we should change that." Her words hung in the air, inviting, yet non-confrontational. Ethan hesitated, torn between his instinct to retreat into his shell and the growing desire to understand the woman sitting across from him. Finally, he nodded. "Maybe we should." From that point on, their relationship began to shift. Small moments of connection started to accumulate, building a foundation of trust and mutual respect. One evening, while sipping coffee in the kitchen, Ethan mentioned his love for architecture, explaining how he used to dream of designing skyscrapers before opting for a career in finance. Clara listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that encouraged him to open up further. In return, she shared stories about her childhood, describing the joy she found in creating art and the challenges she faced growing up in a family that sometimes misunderstood her passions. As they talked, they discovered unexpected commonalities. Both valued hard work and perseverance, traits instilled in them by their parents. Both also harbored secret fears. Ethan worried about failing those who depended on him, while Clara feared being overshadowed by Ethan's success. These revelations brought them closer, allowing them to see each other not as strangers bound by duty, but as individuals navigating the complexities of life together. One weekend, Ethan surprised Clara by taking her to a local art gallery. Though he had no prior interest in such outings, he wanted to support her passion and learn more about the world she loved so deeply. As they wandered through the exhibits, Clara explained the techniques and symbolism behind various pieces, her enthusiasm infectious. Ethan found himself drawn in, marveling at how much beauty and meaning could be conveyed through a single stroke of a brush. "You know," Ethan remarked as they stood before a particularly striking painting, "I think I'm starting to understand why you love this so much." Clara grinned, her eyes lighting up. "Really? What made you change your mind?" "It's not just about the visuals," Ethan said thoughtfully. "It's about telling a story, evoking emotion. It's almost like creating a language without words." Clara nodded, touched by his insight. "Exactly. Art is communication. It's how I connect with the world." That day marked a turning point in their marriage. For the first time, Ethan actively participated in Clara's interests, showing genuine curiosity and appreciation for her talents. In turn, Clara encouraged him to revisit his own creative side, suggesting they collaborate on a project someday. Though Ethan laughed off the idea initially, the seed was planted and he found himself sketching again during quiet moments alone. Despite these positive developments, their journey was far from smooth. Old habits die hard, and both Ethan and Clara struggled to overcome ingrained fears and insecurities. Ethan wrestled with the notion of vulnerability, terrified that letting someone in would weaken his resolve. Clara, meanwhile, battled feelings of inadequacy, wondering if she could ever truly measure up to the larger-than-life figure her husband presented to the world. But progress, no matter how slow, is still progress. Each conversation, each shared laugh, and each act of kindness chipped away at the barriers between them. They were learning, not just about each other, but about themselves. And though neither could predict what the future held, they began to realize that their marriage had the potential to become something extraordinary. Underneath the polished surfaces of their lives, cracks were forming, not fractures of destruction, but fissures of growth. Through these cracks, light seeped in, illuminating the path forward. Together, Ethan and Clara took their first tentative steps down that path, unaware of the trials and triumphs that awaited them, but determined to face whatever came next hand in hand. As weeks turned into months, Ethan and Clara's relationship continued to evolve. The initial awkwardness that had defined their early days together began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of familiarity and comfort. They weren't perfect, far from it, but they were learning how to navigate the complexities of their marriage. Each day brought new discoveries about each other, some delightful, others challenging. Yet through it all, they remained committed to understanding one another, even when it meant confronting uncomfortable truths. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Ethan returned home to find Clara curled up on the couch, surrounded by paint-splattered canvases and half-empty cups of tea. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, and her clothes bore smudges of color, evidence of her creative endeavors. She looked up as he entered, giving him a warm smile. "Hey," she said softly. "How was your day?" Ethan sighed, loosening his tie as he sank into the chair opposite her. "Busy, stressful, the usual." He glanced at the paintings scattered around the room, noting the vivid hues and intricate details. "What about you? Any masterpieces today?" Clara chuckled, shaking her head. "Not quite, but I'm working on something special, a piece inspired by our conversations lately." "Our conversations?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You mean like the ones where I talk about boring financial reports?" "No," Clara replied with a playful grin. "The real ones, the ones where we actually open up to each other." Her words struck a chord with Ethan. Over the past few months, they had shared more than just surface-level pleasantries. They had delved into deeper topics, dreams, fears, regrets, all the things people often avoid discussing until they feel truly safe. For Ethan, this level of vulnerability was unfamiliar territory, but Clara's gentle persistence had coaxed him out of his shell. Now, hearing her acknowledge those moments made him reflect on how much they had grown together. Curious, Ethan leaned forward. "Can I see it?" Clara hesitated for a moment before nodding. Sure, but don't judge me too harshly. It's still a work in progress. She picked up a canvas leaning against the wall and turned it toward him. The painting depicted two figures standing side by side, their silhouettes blending seamlessly into one another. Behind them stretched a swirling sea of colors, representing chaos and uncertainty, while above them shone a single beam of light, symbolizing hope and unity. "It's beautiful," Ethan murmured, genuinely moved. "What does it mean?" "It's us," Clara explained, her voice soft but steady. "Two people who started off as strangers, navigating challenges and finding ways to connect despite everything. It's not perfect. We're not perfect. But there's beauty in the process." Ethan stared at the painting, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He had always prided himself on being logical and composed, but Clara's art had a way of reaching parts of him he didn't even know existed. "Thank you," he said finally, his tone sincere, "for sharing this, for trusting me enough to let me in." Clara smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "That's what marriage is supposed to be about, isn't it? Trust and growth." Their conversation that night marked a turning point. From then on, Ethan and Clara made a conscious effort to deepen their bond. They spent weekends exploring the city together, trying new restaurants, visiting museums, and taking long walks along the river. These outings allowed them to step away from their individual worlds and simply enjoy each other's company. Slowly, but surely, they began to see each other not just as partners, but as friends. However, life has a way of testing even the strongest relationships. One afternoon, while attending a charity gala hosted by one of Ethan's business associates, they encountered whispers and sideways glances from other guests. Some openly questioned the legitimacy of their marriage, suggesting that Ethan had been tricked into marrying someone beneath his status. Others mocked Clara, implying that she had manipulated him for his wealth. Though neither of them addressed the rumors directly, the tension in the air was palpable. On the drive home that night, Clara broke the silence. "Do you hear what they say about us?" she asked quietly, staring out the window. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter, his jaw clenched. "Yes, I do. And none of it matters." "But it does matter," Clara insisted, turning to face him. "People are judging us without knowing anything about who we really are. Don't you care what they think?" Ethan sighed, pulling over to the side of the road so he could look at her properly. "Of course I care, but not because of what they say. It's because I hate seeing you hurt by their ignorance. You deserve better than that." Clara blinked, surprised by his response. "So, what do we do?" "We prove them wrong," Ethan said firmly. "We show them that this marriage isn't just some transactional agreement, it's real, Clara. And if they can't see that, then it's their loss." The following month, Ethan organized a charity event of his own, an elegant gala aimed at raising funds for underprivileged artists. He invited Clara to showcase her artwork, giving her a platform to shine in front of an audience that included some of the same skeptics who had doubted their relationship. On the night of the event, Clara stood nervously beside her display, watching as guests mingled and admired her creations. To her relief and pride, the response was overwhelmingly positive. People marveled at her talent, praising the emotion and depth captured in every piece. As Ethan watched from across the room, he felt a surge of pride unlike anything he'd experienced before. This wasn't just about defending their marriage. It was about celebrating Clara for who she truly was. When he approached her later, holding 2 glasses of champagne, he couldn't help but smile. "Well, Mrs. Caldwell," he teased, handing her a glass. "Looks like you've won them over." Clara laughed, raising her glass in a toast. To proving them wrong, and to finding happiness anyway. But their journey wasn't without its personal struggles. A few weeks after the gala, Ethan faced a major professional setback. A risky investment failed spectacularly, costing him millions and damaging his reputation. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of failure pressing down on him. He retreated into himself, spending hours locked in his study, replaying every decision that had led to the disaster. Clara noticed the change immediately and decided to intervene. One evening, she knocked gently on the door of his study. "Ethan?" she called, peeking inside. "Can I come in?" He looked up, startled, then nodded. "Yeah, sure." Clara entered, carrying a tray with coffee and a plate of cookies. "I thought you might need a break," she said, setting the tray on his desk. "And some company." Ethan managed a weak smile. "Thanks, I appreciate it." They sat in silence for a while, sipping their coffee. Finally, Clara spoke. "You know, it's okay to feel disappointed. Everyone fails sometimes, even someone as brilliant as you." Ethan shook his head, his expression grim. "This isn't just disappointment, Clara. This is embarrassment. I let people down, my team, my investors, myself. And yet, here you are," Clara countered softly. "Still standing. Still fighting. That's what matters, Ethan. Not the failure itself, but how you respond to it." Her words resonated deeply with him. For the first time since the crisis began, he allowed himself to accept that setbacks were part of life. More importantly, he realized that he didn't have to face them alone. With Clara by his side, offering unwavering support, he found the strength to rebuild and move forward. In return, Ethan supported Clara's dreams. When she expressed interest in opening her own art gallery, he offered to help fund the project, using his resources and connections to make it happen. Together, they scouted locations, designed layouts, and planned exhibitions. Watching Clara's excitement grow with each step of the process filled Ethan with a sense of fulfillment he hadn't anticipated. Their partnership extended beyond their personal lives. It became a collaboration built on mutual respect and shared goals. Through these trials and triumphs, Ethan and Clara's love deepened. They learned that true connection requires effort, patience, and vulnerability. It means embracing imperfections and choosing to stand by each other, even when the world seems determined to tear you apart. By the time the gallery opened its doors, to the public they were no longer just husband and wife. They were teammates, confidants, and best friends. As they stood together at the grand opening, surrounded by friends, family, and admirers, Ethan wrapped an arm around Clara's shoulders. "You know," he said, gazing at the crowd, "when I agreed to this marriage, I thought I was making a deal. Instead, I got so much more." Clara leaned into him, smiling. "Me too. Funny how life works, isn't it?" Funny indeed. Because, in the end, their story wasn't about overcoming odds or defying expectations. It was about finding joy in the unexpected and building a future rooted in trust, love, and endless possibilities. The success of Clara's art gallery marked a significant milestone in their lives, but it also brought new challenges. The gallery quickly gained attention, drawing visitors from all over the city and earning rave reviews in local newspapers. Critics praised Clara's unique vision and talent, while aspiring artists sought her guidance and mentorship. For Clara, this was a dream come true, a chance to share her passion with the world and inspire others. But with success came scrutiny, and not everyone was pleased to see her thrive. Rumors began to circulate among certain social circles, fueled by jealousy and misunderstanding. Some whispered that Clara's achievements were only possible because of Ethan's wealth and influence, dismissing her hard work as mere privilege. Others questioned whether their marriage was genuine, suggesting that Ethan had been coerced into supporting her ambitions. These whispers reached Clara during quiet moments when she least expected them, an offhand comment at a party, a snide remark overheard in passing. Each time they stung, planting seeds of doubt in her mind. Ethan noticed the toll these rumors were taking on Clara. She became quieter, more reserved, and seemed hesitant to celebrate her accomplishments. One evening, after returning home from an event where she had received subtle jabs disguised as compliments, Clara retreated to her studio without saying a word. Ethan followed her, finding her seated on the floor amidst half-finished paintings, her face buried in her hands. "Clara?" he asked gently, kneeling beside her. "What's wrong?" She looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Do you ever feel like no matter how hard we try, people will always find a way to tear us down?" Like nothing we do is good enough. For them? Ethan sighed, sitting down next to her. I know it hurts, he said softly. But those people don't define who you are, or who we are. Their opinions don't change the fact that you're incredibly talented and worked tirelessly to get here. But what if they're right about some things? Clara countered, her voice trembling. What if I am overshadowed by your name? What if people only care about me because of you? Ethan took her hand, his grip firm yet comforting. Listen to me. You are not defined by my success or anyone else's expectations. This gallery exists because of your vision, your effort, and your creativity. No one can take that away from you, not even their cruel words. His reassurance helped steady her, but Clara still struggled with self-doubt. Determined to prove their detractors wrong, Ethan proposed an idea, a joint project that would showcase both their talents. He suggested hosting an exhibition combining architecture and art, blending his sketches with her paintings to create a cohesive narrative. It was a bold move, one that required vulnerability and trust. But Clara agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to silence critics once and for all. As they prepared for the exhibition, Ethan and Clara spent countless hours collaborating, bouncing ideas off each other and refining their concepts. They transformed Ethan's study into a shared workspace, filling it with blueprints, canvases, and notes scribbled on scraps of paper. The process wasn't always smooth. There were disagreements and moments of frustration, but they approached every challenge as a team. Slowly, their individual strengths began to complement each other, creating something neither could have achieved alone. When the day of the exhibition arrived, anticipation buzzed through the air. The venue was packed with guests, including friends, family, colleagues, and even some skeptics eager to see what the couple had created. As attendees moved through the space, they encountered a series of installations that told a story of growth, resilience, and unity. One piece featured a towering architectural model surrounded by swirling abstract paintings, symbolizing the balance between structure and emotion. Another displayed a timeline of their journey, from strangers bound by duty to partners united by choice. The highlight of the exhibition was a massive mural painted directly onto the wall, depicting two figures standing back to back, facing separate horizons. Overlaid on the mural were phrases written in Ethan's handwriting. Strength isn't found in solitude. Love grows in shared struggles. Together we build bridges. Visitors lingered before the mural, captivated by its message of partnership and perseverance. At the end of the night, Ethan and Clara stood together, watching as guests mingled and admired their work. A journalist approached them, microphone in hand. This exhibition is truly remarkable, she said. How did you two manage to blend such different disciplines so seamlessly? Ethan glanced at Clara, who smiled encouragingly. It wasn't easy, he admitted. But we learned that our differences aren't obstacles, they're opportunities. When you combine two perspectives, you create something stronger than either could achieve alone. Clara nodded, adding, and sometimes, the best collaborations happen when you trust someone enough to let them in, to share your fears, your dreams, and your vulnerabilities. The journalist smiled, jotting down their responses. Well, whatever challenges you've faced, it's clear that your bond has only grown stronger. Congratulations on a stunning exhibition, and on proving that love and creativity can conquer anything. After the journalist left, Ethan turned to Clara, his expression soft. You know, he said, when we started this, I thought it was just about silencing critics. Now I realize it's about something bigger. It's about showing the world what we've built together. And showing ourselves, Clara added, her voice filled with emotion. Because if we believe in us, no one else's opinion really matters. Their triumph didn't erase all difficulties, however. Personal challenges continued to test their relationship. When Ethan faced another professional setback, a failed merger that threatened to destabilize his company, he felt the familiar weight of failure pressing down on him. This time, though, he didn't retreat into isolation. Instead, he leaned on Clara, sharing his frustrations and fears openly. She listened without judgment, offering encouragement and reminding him of his resilience. You've overcome worse than this, she told him one night as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights. Remember when you lost that investment last year? You bounced back stronger than ever, and you'll do it again. Her faith in him reignited his determination. With Clara's support, Ethan navigated the crisis, making tough decisions and rallying his team. Though the road was rocky, he emerged with renewed confidence and a deeper appreciation for the woman who stood steadfastly by his side. In return, Ethan supported Clara's aspirations, helping her expand the gallery and organize workshops for young artists. He attended every opening, cheering her on and celebrating her victories as if they were his own. Together, they proved that their partnership wasn't just about enduring hardships, it was about thriving despite them. Through these trials and triumphs, Ethan and Clara discovered that love isn't static. It evolves, deepens, and strengthens with time. They learned to communicate openly, to embrace vulnerability, and to prioritize each other above external pressures. Their marriage became a testament to the power of teamwork, resilience, and unwavering belief in one another. By the time they celebrated their second anniversary, Ethan and Clara knew they had built something extraordinary. They weren't the same people who had walked down the aisle months earlier, hesitant, uncertain, and guarded. They had grown into partners who trusted, respected, and cherished each other. And though life would undoubtedly throw more challenges their way, they faced the future with confidence, knowing they could handle anything as long as they faced it together. As they danced under the stars that night, surrounded by loved ones and laughter, Ethan leaned close to whisper in Clara's ear. "I used to think love was a distraction," he admitted. "But now I know it's the foundation everything else rests on. Thank you for teaching me that." Clara smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for believing in me, even when I doubted myself." In that moment, beneath the glow of fairy lights and the hum of music, they realized their story wasn't just about overcoming odds or defying expectations. It was about finding joy in the unexpected, building a life rooted in trust, and discovering that love, when nurtured and cherished, has the power to transform everything it touches. Years had passed since Ethan and Clara's wedding day, and their lives were now a tapestry woven with shared experiences, challenges overcome, and dreams realized. What had started as an arranged marriage born out of duty had transformed into a partnership brimming with love, respect, and mutual admiration. They stood side by side on the grand opening night of Clara's second art gallery, a larger, more ambitious project that marked another milestone in her career. The venue buzzed with energy, filled with friends, family, admirers, and even former skeptics who had come to witness the undeniable bond between the couple. Ethan watched proudly from across the room as Clara greeted guests, her confidence radiating like the warm glow of the chandeliers above. Gone was the shy, uncertain woman he had met on their wedding day. In her place stood a vibrant, self-assured artist whose work inspired others and whose presence commanded attention. He couldn't help but smile as he remembered how far they had come, from reluctant partners bound by obligation to soulmates united by choice. As the evening wore on, Ethan found himself reflecting on their journey. He thought back to the early days of their marriage, when silence often stretched between them like an unspoken barrier. At the time, he had assumed their differences would keep them apart forever. But instead, those differences became the foundation of their connection. Clara's creativity taught him to see beauty in imperfection, while his discipline helped her channel her passion into tangible goals. Together, they balanced each other in ways neither could have anticipated. Their relationship hadn't been without its struggles. There were moments when doubt crept in, when external pressures threatened to drive a wedge between them, or when personal insecurities clouded their judgment. Yet through every trial, they chose to face it together. Whether it was navigating professional setbacks, dealing with harsh criticism, or simply learning how to communicate better, they approached each challenge as a team. And in doing so, they discovered that adversity wasn't something to fear. It was an opportunity to grow stronger. Clara eventually noticed Ethan standing alone near the bar, lost in thought. She excused herself from a conversation and made her way over to him, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, slipping her arm through his. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Just thinking about how much has changed since that first day we met." Clara tilted her head, intrigued. "Changed? How so?" "Well," he began, glancing around the room at the sea of smiling faces. "Back then, I thought this whole thing was just a transaction, a deal, something my parents wanted me to do, but now—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Now I realize it's so much more than that. You're not just my wife, Clara. You're my best friend, my partner, my muse." Clara felt her heart swell with emotion. "And you're mine," she replied softly. "I never imagined we'd end up here, not just in terms of success, but in terms of us. This life we've built together, it's everything I ever hoped for, even if I didn't know it at the time." They shared a quiet moment, their eyes locking in silent understanding. It was rare for either of them to speak so openly about their feelings, but tonight felt different. Surrounded by the fruits of their labor, the gallery, the artwork, the people who mattered most, they allowed themselves to acknowledge the depth of their bond. Later that evening, after the crowds had thinned and the music had softened, Ethan and Clara stepped outside onto the balcony overlooking the city. The air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of blooming flowers. Below them, the streets glittered with lights, a reminder of the world they had navigated together. "You know," Ethan said after a long pause, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you." Clara turned to look at him, her brow furrowing slightly. "What is it?" "I've spent most of my life chasing success," he admitted, his voice tinged with both pride and regret. "Building businesses, making deals, proving myself to everyone around me. But none of that matters without someone to share it with, without you. You've shown me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or accolades, it's measured in moments like this. Moments where I feel whole." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes as she listened to his words. She reached out, taking his hand, in hers. "Ethan, you've given me so much too. You've believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You've supported my dreams, celebrated my victories, and stood by me during my darkest days. You've made me feel seen, in a way no one else ever has." For a moment, they simply held each other's gaze, letting the weight of their words sink in. Then Ethan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in a tight embrace. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair, "for being exactly who you are." "And thank you," Clara murmured, resting her head against his chest. "For seeing me, for really seeing me." As they stood there under the stars, bathed in the soft glow of the city lights, they knew their story was far from over. Life would continue to throw challenges their way, uncertainties, sacrifices, triumphs, but they faced the future with unwavering confidence. Because they had learned the most important lesson of all: love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other again and again, no matter what. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows of their penthouse, Clara woke to find Ethan already awake, sitting at the dining table with a cup of coffee in hand. He looked up as she entered, offering her a warm smile. "Good morning," he said. "I was thinking, maybe we should take a trip." "A trip?" Clara asked, curious. "Where to?" "Somewhere new," Ethan replied, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "Somewhere we can explore together, maybe Europe or Asia, somewhere neither of us has been before." Clara grinned, delighted by the idea. "That sounds amazing, but what brought this on?" Ethan shrugged, swirling his coffee thoughtfully. "Life's short, isn't it? We've worked hard, built something incredible together. Now it's time to enjoy it, to experience the world beyond these walls. Besides," he added with a playful smirk, "I figure it's about time I started showing off my talented wife to the rest of the globe." Clara laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." But you love me anyway, Ethan teased, reaching out to squeeze her hand. Yes, she said, her expression softening. Yes, I do. In the weeks that followed, they planned their adventure with the same enthusiasm and teamwork that had defined their marriage. From booking flights to researching destinations, they approached the trip as a shared endeavor, eager to create new memories together. And when they finally boarded the plane hand in hand, they did so with hearts full of gratitude for the journey behind them and for the one still ahead. As the plane soared into the sky, Ethan leaned over to whisper in Clara's ear. You? No, I used to think I was marrying a stranger. Instead, I found my best friend. Clara smiled, squeezing his hand. And I thought I was walking into uncertainty. Instead, I found a home. Together, they gazed out the window at the endless expanse of clouds below, feeling the promise of infinite possibilities stretching before them. Their story wasn't just about two people finding love. It was about discovering that love, when nurtured and cherished, has the power to transform lives. And as they embarked on this next chapter, they knew one thing for certain. Wherever life took them, they would face it together, with courage, with laughter, and with love that would last a lifetime.